Prince Kale stepped off his royal transport and looked around the human space station with barely hidden disgust. The metal walls were plain gray. No golden decorations covered the surfaces. No massive statues showed the power of the rulers. The Terran embassy looked like a simple office building floating in space. This is supposed to be their most important diplomatic station. Kale asked his advisor, Commander Wren. Yes, my lord. This is where they conduct all major negotiations with other species, Wren replied, checking his datapad. Kale shook his head. The Valoran Empire had conquered 12 star systems in the past decade. Every victory had come after spectacular displays of power. Their warships were massive, covered in gold and silver. Their palaces reached toward the sky like metal mountains. When other species saw valor and might, they understood their place in the galaxy. But this human station looked boring, almost insulting. 2 human guards stood near the entrance. They wore simple blue uniforms with no decorations. Their weapons were basic energy rifles, nothing like the ornate plasma cannons that Valoran soldiers carried. The guards nodded politely as Kale's group approached. Prince Kale of the Valoran Empire, one guard said, reading from a small device. Ambassador Lin is waiting for you.
Ow.
No formal greeting. No acknowledgement of his royal status. Kale felt his anger rise, but he controlled it. These humans would learn proper respect soon enough. The corridor inside the station was just as plain as the outside. White walls, simple lighting, no artwork or displays of military power. Kale had visited embassies on dozens of worlds. Usually, the walls showed paintings of great battles or statues of famous leaders. The human embassy felt empty. Where are their achievements? Kale whispered to Wren. Where are the displays of their conquests? Perhaps they have none worth showing, Wren whispered back. They reached a conference room after walking for several minutes. The room was small and simple. A basic table sat in the center with chairs around it. No throne for the ambassador, no raised platform to show authority. Just plain furniture that looked like it came from any office building. Ambassador Lin entered the room a moment later. She was a woman with gray hair, wearing a dark business suit. No royal robes. No crown or symbols of rank. No armed bodyguards followed her. She looked like someone who might run a shipping company, not represent an entire species in galactic politics. Prince Kale, she said, extending her hand. Welcome to our station. Kale stared at her hand for a moment. In Valoran culture, lesser beings bowed to royalty. They did not offer to shake hands like equals. But he decided to allow this small insult. Soon, this woman would understand her proper place. Ambassador Lin, he said, shaking her hand briefly. I come with a message from Emperor Drac of the Valoran Empire. Please, sit, Lin said, gesturing to the chairs around the table. Kale remained standing. This was his first power move. By staying on his feet, he showed that he was above sitting with lesser beings. Lin sat down and pulled out a small notebook and pen. Not even an electronic device. Just paper and ink like some primitive civilization. Represent the greatest military force in this sector of the galaxy, Kale began, his voice strong and commanding. The Valoran Empire has brought peace and order to 12 star systems. Our fleet contains over 3,000 ships. Our armies are trained from birth to serve the Empire. Lin wrote something in her notebook but said nothing. The Valoran Empire now turns its attention to human space, Kale continued. We offer you the chance to join our growing civilization. Accept our protection, and your people will prosper under Valoran rule. He paused, waiting for questions or protests. Lin continued writing. Of course, this protection requires payment. Your industrial worlds will provide raw materials for our expanding fleet. Your agricultural planets will help feed our people. Your most capable citizens will serve in our military and government. Still no response from the ambassador. Kale felt his confidence growing. Clearly, the humans were too shocked by his generous offer to speak. We understand this is a significant decision, Kale said. Therefore, the Emperor grants you 30 standard days to prepare for integration into our empire. During this time, we expect you to begin organizing your resources for transfer to Valoran control. Lin looked up from her notebook. Is there anything else? Kale blinked. Anything else? Did you understand what I just said? This is an offer of protection from the most powerful empire in the galaxy. I heard your proposal clearly, Lin said. Is there anything else you need to add? Do you have any questions about the terms? Kale asked. No, the terms are quite clear, Lin replied. And what is your response? We'll consider your proposal, Lin said, standing up. Thank you for visiting our station. She moved toward the door. Wait, Kale said. That's it? You'll consider it. Yes, Lin said, pausing at the doorway. We'll be in touch. Then she left. Kale stood in the empty conference room, staring at the door. In 12 previous conquests, this moment had always gone differently. Sometimes leaders begged for mercy. Sometimes they offered counterproposals. Sometimes they declared war immediately. But none had ever just said they would consider it and walked away. My lord, Ren said carefully. Perhaps they need time to discuss it with their government. 30 days, Kale said. We gave them 30 days. What's to discuss? Back in their quarters on the station, Kale tried to understand what had happened. The Valoran diplomatic protocol was designed to force quick decisions. Present overwhelming power demands submission, and wait for the inevitable surrender or foolish declaration of war. But the humans had done neither. The next morning, Kale requested another meeting with Ambassador Lin. A human secretary told him the ambassador was busy, but would try to fit him into her schedule. Try to fit him in? He was royalty representing an empire of 12 star systems. How could she be too busy to meet with him? 2 days passed. No word from the ambassador. No counter-proposal. No questions about the terms. No requests for clarification. Nothing. Kale sent Commander Ren to gather intelligence about human military preparations. Surely they were mobilizing their fleet or calling for help from allies. But Ren returned with confusing information. The humans appear to be conducting normal business, my lord, Ren reported. Their trade ships come and go on regular schedules. Their defense fleet maintains standard patrol routes. There's no sign of military preparation. What about communications? Are they calling for help? Normal diplomatic traffic only. Nothing unusual. Kale felt growing frustration. Every other species had reacted immediately to Valoran demands. Fear, anger, desperate bargaining, something. But the humans seemed to be ignoring him entirely. On the third day, stormed past the human secretary and entered Ambassador Lin's office without permission. Lin looked up from her desk, where she was reading what appeared to be trade reports. Prince Kale, she said calmly. I don't believe we had a meeting scheduled. I need to talk, Kale said. It's been 3 days since I delivered the Empire's offer. What is your decision? As I mentioned, we're still considering it, Lin said. What is there to consider? You have 2 choices. Submit to the Empire or face destruction. Those are your only options. Lin set down her reading material. Prince Kale, may I ask how many species the Valoran Empire has conquered? 12, Kale said proudly. And how did those conquests usually proceed? Each species recognized Valoran's superiority and submitted to imperial rule, Kale said. All of them? Yes. Once they understood the power of our fleet and the futility of resistance, they made the intelligent choice. Interesting, Lin said. And these species, are they happy under Valoran rule? Kale frowned. Happiness is not relevant. They have peace and order. See, Lin said. Thank you for clarifying that. She picked up her reading material again. That's it. Kale asked. Yes, thank you for stopping by. Kale left the office feeling more confused than angry. The conversation had felt wrong somehow, like he was missing something important. That evening, he called his father, Emperor Drak. On a secure communication channel, how proceed the negotiations, my son? The Emperor asked, his face appearing on the video screen. The humans are strange, father, Kale said. They show no fear of our power. They ask no questions about terms. They simply say they are considering our offer. Perhaps they plan to attack our delegation, Emperor Drak said. Are you in danger? No, father. They treat us like normal diplomatic guests. They provide food and quarters. but they don't seem to care about our presence. Explain. Kale described his meetings with Ambassador Lin and the complete lack of reaction from the human government. Emperor Drek listened without interruption. This is unusual, the Emperor admitted. Most species react with either immediate submission or immediate hostility. This middle path concerns me. What should I do? Wait, Emperor Drek said. If they wish to consider our offer, let them consider. But make it clear that our patience has limits. The fourth day brought the same silence. Kale requested another meeting and was told the ambassador was reviewing his proposal with her government. When would she have an answer? The secretary couldn't say. Kale spent the day walking through the station, observing the humans. They seemed completely normal. Station workers performed their duties without concern. Merchants conducted business as usual. Children attended school in the station's education center. It was as if the greatest military threat in their sector of the galaxy was just another item on someone's schedule. By the fifth day, Kale's patience broke. He marched into Ambassador Lin's office again, this time with Commander Ren and 2 royal guards. Enough games, Kale said. I demand an immediate answer to our proposal. Lin looked up calmly, seeming unbothered by the armed guards. Prince Kale, I understand your eagerness for a response, she said. But important decisions require careful consideration. What is there to consider? Submit or be destroyed. Choose. Those may be the only options you're familiar with, Lin said. But we prefer to explore all possibilities before making major decisions. There are no other possibilities. The Valoran Empire does not negotiate. We offer protection in exchange for resources and loyalty. Accept or face the consequences. And what consequences might those be? Kale felt his temper rising. War, Ambassador. Total war. Our fleet will reduce your worlds to ash. Your people will be scattered across the galaxy as refugees. Your civilization will become a forgotten memory. I see, Lin said, making a note in her book. Thank you for clarifying your position. So what is your answer? We're still considering it. Kale slammed his hand on her desk. How can you still be considering it? I just threatened to destroy your entire species. Yes, you did, Lin said. Was there anything else? The prince stared at her in shock. He had just delivered the most serious threat in galactic diplomacy, and she acted like he had commented on the weather. You're not afraid? He said, almost whispering. Should I be? Every species fears valor and power. Every species recognizes our superiority. Why don't you? Lin stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. Prince Kale, how old are you? 23 standard years. Why does that matter? You're young. This is probably your first major diplomatic mission. I am a prince of the Valoran Empire. My experience is not in question. Of course not, Lin said. Tell me, have you ever heard of the Zerothi hegemony? Kale frowned. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. I don't believe so, he said. Interesting, Lin said, turning back to face him. They were quite powerful once. Controlled many star systems. Had a large military. Made threats very similar to the ones you've made. What happened to them? Lin smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. It's nothing, she said. We did absolutely nothing at all. Before Kale could ask what she meant, Lin sat back down at her desk. I'm afraid I have work to finish, she said. Perhaps we can continue this conversation tomorrow. Kale left the office with more questions than answers. That night, he asked Commander Ren to research the Zerothi hegemony. Find everything you can about them, Kale ordered. I want to know who they were and what happened to them. But as he tried to sleep, one phrase kept repeating in his mind. Ambassador Lin had said the humans did absolutely nothing to the Zerothi. How could doing nothing destroy a powerful civilization? The answer to that question would change everything Kale thought he knew about power in the galaxy. Commander. Ren knocked on Prince Kale's door early the next morning. The prince had barely slept, thinking about Ambassador Lin's strange words about the Zerothi hegemony. Enter, Kale called out. Ren stepped inside, carrying a datapad with a worried expression. My lord, I found information about the Zerothi hegemony. You need to see this. Kale took the datapad and began reading. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Zerathi hegemony had controlled 15 star systems 50 years ago. Their military was powerful, with over 4,000 warships. They had conquered weaker species and built a growing empire. According to the records, they were very similar to the Valorans. Keep reading, Ren said quietly. Kale scrolled down to see what had happened to them. The records showed that 50 years ago, the Zerathi had made first contact with humanity. They had demanded tribute and submission, just like the Valorans were doing now. The humans had refused, but then something strange had happened. There were no records of a great war, no massive space battles, no descriptions of human fleets destroying Zerathi worlds. Instead, there was just a gradual decline in Zerathi power and influence. I don't understand, Kale said. What destroyed them? Keep reading, Ren repeated. The records showed that after the Zerathi threatened humanity, strange things began happening. Trade agreements with other species started falling apart. Diplomatic missions were cancelled. Economic partnerships ended. Within 2 years, the Zerathi found themselves alone in the galaxy. But how did this happen? Kale asked. The humans, Ren said. According to these records, humanity had become the center of trade and diplomacy in this region of the galaxy. When they stopped dealing with the Zerathi, other species followed their lead. Kale felt a chill run down his spine. Where are the Zerathi now? They still exist, Ren said. But they control only 3 star systems. Their empire collapsed when no one would trade with them or recognize their government. They became isolated and forgotten. Kale set down the datapad with shaking hands. Ambassador Lin said the humans did nothing to them. In a way, that's true, Ren said. They didn't attack the Zerathi. They simply stopped acknowledging their existence. The prince sat in silence for several minutes, processing this information. Finally, he stood up. I need to speak with Ambassador Lin immediately. An hour later, Kale sat across from Ambassador Lin in the same plain conference room where this had all started. But now the simple surroundings felt different, less insulting and more ominous. You wanted to know about the Zerathi hegemony, Lin said, settling into her chair. Yes, Kale said. Commander Ren found records, but I want to hear it from you. Lin nodded. The Zerathi were proud warriors. They believed strength came from conquest and intimidation. Sound familiar? Kale said nothing. 50 years ago, they sent a delegation to Earth, Lin continued. Much like yourself, they demanded submission and tribute. They threatened to destroy our colonies if we refused. What did you do? We said we would consider their proposal, Lin said. Just like I told you, but you never gave them an answer. Oh, we did give them an answer, Lin said. We told them no, Kale frowned. Then why didn't they attack? The records show no war between humans and Zerathi, because by the time we officially refused, it no longer mattered. Lin said. She stood up and walked to a wall display that Kale hadn't noticed before. With the touch of a button, a star map appeared, showing the local region of the galaxy. Look at this map, Lin said. What do you see? Kale studied the display. It showed dozens of star systems connected by trade routes and diplomatic links. At the center of most of these connections was a blue symbol representing human space. You're at the center of everything, Kale said slowly. Exactly, Lin said. Over the past 2 centuries, humanity has become the hub of commerce and diplomacy in this region. Not through conquest, but through trade, cooperation, and mutual benefit. She touched the map, and it changed to show the situation 50 years ago. The connections were different then, with human space being just one of many powers. But even then, humans had been connected to most other species. When the Zerathi made their demands, we didn't just refuse them, Lin said. We stopped all trade with them. We ceased diplomatic relations. We canceled cultural exchanges and scientific cooperation. But that's just one species, Kale said. How could that hurt a 15-system empire? Lin smiled that same unpleasant smile from the day before. Because it wasn't just us. The map changed again, showing how other species had gradually cut ties with the Zerathi as well. Alteran Republic depended on human technology for their manufacturing, Lin explained. When they had to choose between maintaining relations with the Zerathi or keeping their trade agreements with us? The choice was easy. She highlighted another section of the map. The Keldan Federation needed human ships to transport their agricultural products to market. The Zirathi offered them nothing they needed. More connections disappeared from the map as Lynn continued her explanation. The Vorthon Collective used human financial systems for interstellar banking. The Nexer Union relied on human mediators to resolve disputes with their neighbors. Kale watched as the Zarathi systems became more and more isolated on the display. One by one, other species chose to maintain their relationships with humanity rather than risk those relationships for a new alliance with the Zirathi, Lynn said. But surely some species supported them. Kale protested. Few did initially, Lynn admitted. But those species found themselves isolated as well. When you can't trade with the majority of the galaxy, your economy suffers. When other species won't talk to you, your diplomatic options disappear. The final map showed the Zarathi hegemony as it existed today. 3 lonely star systems with almost no external connections. The Zarathi never understood what was happening, Lynn said. They kept preparing for war, building more ships, training more soldiers. They expected us to attack them, but you never did. We never needed to, Lynn said. They destroyed themselves. Kale stared at the map in horror. Their empire fell apart because no one would talk to them. Economic isolation is more devastating than any weapon, Lynn said. No empire can survive without trade. No government can function without diplomatic recognition. The Zarathi had built their power on intimidation and fear, but when that stopped working, they had nothing left. She turned off the display and returned to her seat. The final irony was that they could have ended their isolation at any time, Lynn continued. All they had to do was abandon their aggressive policies and begin acting like responsible members of the galactic community. Why didn't they? Pride, Lynn said simply. They couldn't accept that their way of doing things was wrong. They kept believing that eventually other species would fear them enough to resume relations. They never understood that fear is not the foundation of lasting power. Kale felt like the room was spinning around him. Everything he had been taught about strength and power suddenly seemed wrong. How long did it take? He asked quietly. 2 years for the economic collapse, Lynn said. 5 years for the political breakdown. Within a decade, the great Zarathi hegemony had become a footnote in galactic history. And they never tried to rebuild their relationships. They tried, Lynn said. But by then, it was too late. Other species had found new trading partners and allies. The galaxy had moved on without them. Kale sat in silence for a long time, trying to process everything he had learned. Finally, he looked up at Ambassador Lynn. Is that what you're planning to do to us? That depends on you, Lynn said. The Zarathi made their choice. Now you have to make yours. What choice? You've shown me what happens to species that threaten humanity. Actually, I've shown you what happens to species that refuse to change, Lynn corrected. The Zarathi had many opportunities to choose a different path. They could have approached us as equals, seeking mutual benefit, instead of as conquerors demanding submission.
Ow.
She leaned forward slightly. The Valoran Empire is following the exact same path that destroyed the Zarathi. You believe that power comes from fear and intimidation. You think other species will submit to you because you have large fleets and strong armies, don't we? Kale asked, though his voice lacked conviction. How many species actually chose to join your empire? Lynn asked. How many came to you seeking protection and alliance? Kale thought about this question. The truth was uncomfortable. They all submitted after we demonstrated our military superiority. They submitted because they were afraid, Lynn said. But fear is not loyalty. The moment a stronger power appears or the moment your empire shows weakness, those species will abandon you. But our military is strong, so was the Zarathi military, Lynn pointed out. They had more ships than you do now. It didn't save them from irrelevance. Kale realized that his hands were shaking. What do you want from us? Nothing, Lynn said. We don't want tribute or submission. We don't need your resources or your territory. Then what? We want you to leave us alone, Lynn said simply. We want you to stop threatening peaceful species and trying to build an empire through conquest. And if we refuse? Lin shrugged. Then you'll follow the same path as the Zerathi. We'll stop all trade and diplomatic relations with your empire. Other species will gradually do the same. Your economy will collapse, your government will lose legitimacy, and your empire will fade into obscurity. But that could take years. Yes, Lin said. Much longer than a war would take. Wars end quickly, one way or another. Economic and diplomatic isolation can last for generations. Kale felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. You would make us irrelevant. You wouldn't need to, Lin said. You would make yourselves irrelevant by clinging to an outdated way of thinking about power. She stood up again and walked back to the window. Look out there, she said, gesturing toward the stars. Do you see enemy fleets preparing to attack your empire? Do you see armies gathering to invade your worlds? Kale joined her at the window. Space looked peaceful. Ships moved along normal trade routes. Everything seemed ordinary. No, he said. That's because we're not your enemies, Lin said. We don't want to destroy you. We simply want you to stop trying to destroy others. But without conquest, how does an empire grow? The same way humanity has grown, Lin said. Through cooperation, trade, scientific advancement, and cultural exchange. By becoming valuable partners instead of feared overlords. Kale thought about the star map he had seen earlier. Human space was at the center of a vast network of relationships built on mutual benefit rather than fear. The other species in your empire, Lin continued, do they contribute because they want to, or because they're afraid of what will happen if they refuse? They serve the empire because it brings order and stability, Kale said, but the words felt hollow. And what happens when serving the empire becomes more costly than the benefits it provides? Kale didn't answer because he already knew. Those species would rebel or seek protection elsewhere. The Valoran Empire was held together by fear, just like the Zerathi hegemony had been. My father won't listen to this, Kale said finally. Perhaps not, Lin agreed, but you will have to decide what to tell him. What do you mean? You came here as his representative, Lin said. Whatever message you take back will influence his decisions. Kale felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What would you suggest I tell him? The truth, Lin said. Tell him that humanity offers the Valoran Empire a choice. Continue on your current path and face isolation and irrelevance, or change your approach and discover what real power looks like. Real power? The power to build instead of destroy, Lin said. The power to create lasting relationships instead of temporary submission. The power to be remembered as builders of civilization instead of forgotten. Conquerors. She returned to her desk and pulled out a small device. Contains a complete record of the Zeruthi situation, she said, handing it to Kale. Historical documents, economic data, diplomatic correspondence, everything your father will need to understand what happened to them. Kale took the device with trembling hands. There's also a proposal, Lin continued. A framework for how the Valoran Empire could transition from conquest to cooperation. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific partnerships. A path forward that doesn't require you to abandon your strength, just redirect it. You've already prepared this. We prepare for many possibilities, Lin said. We hoped you would be reasonable. Kale looked down at the device in his hands. Such a small thing to contain the future of an empire. How long do we have to decide? As long as you need, Lin said. But remember, every day you continue threatening other species is another day those species learn they can't trust you. Trust, once lost, is much harder to rebuild than it is to maintain. Kale nodded slowly. He understood now why the past week had felt so wrong. He had been trying to intimidate someone who wasn't afraid of him. He had been threatening someone who had the power to make his threats meaningless. Ambassador Lin, he said, in your opinion, what will my father choose? Lin considered this carefully before answering. I don't know Emperor Drek personally, she said, but I know that he built the Valoran Empire through intelligence and strength. Those same qualities could build something much greater than an empire based on fear. Or they could lead him to believe he can succeed where the Zerathi failed. That's possible, Lin admitted. pride has destroyed many powerful leaders throughout galactic history. Kale realized that in this moment, he was facing the same choice that would soon confront his father. Cling to old ideas about power, or embrace a new understanding of what true strength meant. For the first time since arriving at the human station, Kale understood what Ambassador Lin had been showing him. The silence, the calm responses, the complete lack of fear. It hadn't been weakness or confusion. It had been confidence. The confidence of someone who knew they held all the real power in the situation, as he prepared to leave the human embassy. Prince Kale finally understood that silence could indeed cut deeper than any insult. The humans had shown him something worse than hatred or fear. They had shown him indifference. And in a galaxy where empires fought desperately to be remembered, being forgotten was the cruelest fate of all. The question now was whether the Valerian Empire would learn from the Xerathi's mistakes or repeat them.